Hello, my name is Sarah Brazel, and I'm a program officer in the National Center for Special Education Research at the Institute of Education Sciences. I am over the Reading, Writing, and Language Development portfolio in our Standard Research Grant Program. I'm excited today to introduce one of our NICSR-funded researchers, Dr. Elizabeth Kozleski from Stanford University, who led a transformative research project in the area of reading for children with significant cognitive disabilities, with her colleague Pam Hunt from San Francisco State University. After Dr. Kozleski's presentation, I will be moderating a question and answer session. I will take questions from the chat space, so please type your questions in the chat space as you are listening. Dr. Kozleski has uploaded a packet of material to help teachers enhance books to make them accessible to students with diverse learning needs. You can locate these resources in the website Resource File. I would like to provide you a brief introduction to Dr. Elizabeth Kozleski, who has been conducting research since the 1980s, where she started at University of Colorado, Denver, and then continued her work at Arizona State University and University of Kansas until 2018, where she took a position at Stanford University, where she is now a research professor. Dr. Kozleski's extensive research experience and related publications have centered on equity and justice issues in inclusive education. Her research includes very important work with schools, school systems, and state governments to enact systems change in pursuit of opportunities to learn and thrive for multiply marginalized children and youth. In addition to studying systems change in education, she researches how teachers learn and practice in complex, diverse school settings, as well as how and what educational practices improve student learning. She has received many honors, including in 2009, she was asked to give a briefing to Congress on inclusive education and implications for policy. She also co-leads the Learning Differences and Future of Special Education in the Transforming Learning Accelerator. She provides leadership in two other federally funded projects. One is called CEDAR, Collaboration for Effective Educator Development, Accountability, and Reform, whose mission is to support students with disabilities in achieving college and career-ready standards by building the capacity of state personnel preparation systems to prepare teachers and leaders to implement evidence-based practices within multi-tiered systems of support. She also provides leadership on the Special Education Leadership and System-Wide Equity and Access for Students from Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Backgrounds project. Today's session is titled Implementing Comprehensive Emergent Literacy Instruction for Students with Significant Support Needs in General Education Classrooms. The session has already been recorded, so Dr. Kozleski and I will be reviewing the chat now as you listen to the recording played live. At the conclusion of the presentation, I will be facilitating the question and answer session with Dr. Kozleski. I now turn the time over to our presenter, Dr. Elizabeth Kozleski.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Kozleski from Stanford University, and I'm here today to share a research project called Implementing Comprehensive Emergent Literacy Instruction for Students with Severe Disabilities in General Education Classrooms. This project was a collaborative project between the University of Kansas, where I was when we did this work, and San Francisco State University in California. Today's agenda is to introduce you to the importance of comprehensive literacy instruction for kids with very significant learning needs and kids who we might call neurodiverse and students with intellectual disabilities. We're going to learn about the early literacy skill builder approach to learning to read. I'm going to share with you the findings of a research project that we did over the course of 3 years, not only to understand how literacy operates and works for kids with significant needs in general education classrooms, but also to talk about the social validity of doing that in general ed classrooms. We'll talk a little bit about implications, and there'll be a time for questions. I hope that there is some meat in here that fits your needs. Our big research question when we did this project was, does the Emergent Literacy Skill Builder curriculum, which is a evidence-based practice, increase the literacy skills of students with intellectual disabilities and autism when it is implemented in general education classrooms in integrated small group contexts? And does it do so over and above business as usual, the kind of instruction that students usually get in these particular classrooms, in general ed classrooms? So let's get started. There's a reason why we wanted to do this project. And fundamentally, without evidence that students who are neurodiverse can benefit from comprehensive, systematic, emergent reading instruction, it's very likely that they will be denied the opportunity to engage in shared reading, to learn to gain meaning from text, and they will be denied the opportunity to increase their independence as readers. It's also very unlikely that they will learn to read in the context of general education, and they may continue to be served outside general education classrooms. Thus, they are denied the opportunity to learn and access to community in the condition that they do not have access to learning in general education classrooms. What we did was to take an evidence-based curriculum packet that's commercially available, the Early Literacy Skill Builder, designed and developed by Diane Browder and her team at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. This is a comprehensive reading program based on the 5 big functions of reading as determined by the National Literacy Panel at the beginning of the 21st century. The comprehensive reading program includes phonemic awareness, phonics, comprehension, vocabulary, and learning about the conventions of reading. It's implemented in small group contexts. In our case, we did it in general education classrooms with typical peers that we called reading buddies. The other part of the program is called the Building with Sounds and Symbols includes learning about the sounds that letters make, how letter sounds can blend, how to segment sounds, how to use syllabication, how to listen, the principles of the alphabet, how to develop comprehension and vocabulary. And it comes with a set of materials and lesson structures that builds from the easiest to the most complex reading skills. The second part of the program, Building with Stories, is focused on shared story reading, using the conventions of reading, learning how to read from left to right, how to open a book, how to find the name of the author, how to find the title, how to move to the first page, how to look at the text in connection to the pictures, how to listen and predict and anticipate what's going to happen next, and how to build vocabulary. The books that we used for this particular reading project, along with all of the ways that we adapted them to make it easier for children whose fingers were not that nimble or who were unsure about how to turn a page, is available to you in a set of protocols that we included with this lecture. The books that we read are typical picture books for kindergartners, and they went all the way up to 4th grade chapter books that students might use, like the Horrible Harry book that you see pictured here. So just to give you a flavor of what this looks like in action, I'd like to show you this video of a teacher and 2 students working on sounds and symbols.
We have read our Mo's New Friends story already, so now we're going to point to the to the words or the text as we read it. So you guys did it already when we were doing this and you were pointing. We're going to do the same thing here, but now more sentences. Okay? So what Mr. Mo wants us to do, let's get Mo, because you know what? You seem like you're a little out of it. Mo wants you to listen, okay? He wants you to look at the words, right? Yes, can you do that? Can you look at the words? Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to point to the words as we read the story, okay? So I'm going to read the first line and I want you guys to point. There's a way I want you to point. Are you watching? Okay, Mo wants you to look, okay? Here we go. We'll have Mo point. Mo has a new friend coming over today. Mo's new friend is Hoppo the hippo. Hoppo the hippo? Okay? You ready? Okay. You gotta pay attention. Okay? Yes. Okay, you're first. You point. Mo has a new friend coming over today. Okay, wait 1 second. Elizabeth, oh, he points. I want you to read now. Okay? Here you go, you point.
Mo.
He points. You skipped. Start again.
Mo's new friend.
Hoppo.
Hoppo the hippo.
All right, so that just gives you a flavor of the idea that there are these baby steps that the students go through to learn how to read word by word, but to build up to fluency. And there are lots of scripted lessons. You can see that the teacher had a guidebook and then there were materials for the students to use. And this process that we went through happened both with the building with symbols and sounds and also with learning with stories. So what we found out was this. Out of the 80 students that participated in this study, 40 students who got the ELSB and 40 students who were received business as usual. More than half of them were boys and about a third of them were girls. A little less than half of them were nonverbal and 56% were verbal. The largest number of kids, the largest percentage of students in this study were second graders, evenly split between kindergarten and first grade. And then we had some students in third and fourth grade, and that composed our entire sample. The target students in this 80 students were all students who were neurodiverse and were identified as either having autism and or intellectual disabilities. What we learned was very impressive. There are two lines in every graph that you're going to see. One of them is brown, and it is dealing with the intervention, and the other one is blue, and that is the business as usual students. We used two measures of reading. One of them was the Gates-McGinnity, and the other one was the nonverbal language assessment. In both cases, as you can see on these two graphs, students who were in business as usual and the students who were in the ELSB treatment group started at about the same point. And this is across all of the 80 students. And these 80 students were spread out among 5 school districts in the Midwest and across 2 school districts in the California system. In the Gates, McGinnity, and the nonverbal, students gained from the pretest all the way through the assessment systems to the following June. So from September to June, you can see what the increase, all of this was highly significant in terms of their outcomes. And here you can see that when we tested for the conventions of learning, of reading, how to open a book, how to find the title, the author's title, how to turn pages, how to anticipate, how to connect pictures to the words in the story, you can see that the students in conventions of reading improved when they were in the ELSB group. You can see that the students who were in the ELSB group outperformed in terms of comprehension, and they outperformed in phonics skills. The only place where there was no significant difference between the two groups of students was in vocabulary. One of the things that we felt is that most programs that focus on teaching reading to students with significant disabilities do focus on vocabulary. We were not surprised that there was not so much difference between ELSB and business as usual. So we want to talk about what we learned, what these results tell us. They tell us that neurodiverse students can make progress in literacy if the instruction that they receive is direct and systematic. That is, that it is consistent across all 5 days of the learning week, that it builds from one day to the next, that it has systematic approaches to spiraling the content so students practice the skills in multiple ways, and the building blocks of beginning reading are all incorporated into the reading program that the students have. It also taught us that effective comprehensive reading instruction can be provided to students in the context of general education using integrated small group instructional models that benefit students with and without disabilities. In every classroom that we did this work, we had students, typical students in the classroom who served as reading buddies and came to the reading groups and with whom relationships were built over the course of the school year in these reading groups. So if we know that we can make a difference by doing a program like the one that we did, the real question for us is, if the research team isn't there, can it work in typical classrooms? So we conducted a second study that involved everyone who had been in the year-long study that we did. And we wanted to find out the social significance of the goals, that is teaching reading to students with disabilities. How did peers, how did teachers, how did principals feel about that as an appropriate goal? Were the procedures that we use, the small group instruction, the buddy system, were they appropriate to the age group of the students, and did they bring benefit to all of the students? And then the third thing that we wanted to know is, how important do you think do the folks that were part of this study think that the social importance of our work was? So we spent some time in focus groups at the end of the year with peers, with special educators, and with regular ed teachers. And we did interviews with principals to find the answers to these three questions. How important are reading skills, and is inclusive education important? What do you think about the ELSB instruction, the objectives, the materials, the lesson planning? What do you think about the small group lessons? What suggestions do you have to make? What are the challenges around inclusive education in terms of scheduling, staffing, collaboration, context? And then the effects, the reading skills, the social skills, the peer relationships, the systems change. And we found out that in terms of the goals, folks thought that reading is critically important for students with significant disabilities, that it's an important life skill that produces independence for the students. It's a foundation for other skills, and it's a vehicle for access to other environments. Peers said that they were surprised at how competent the students who are neurodiverse were. And as a result, it also expanded efforts to bring students who were neurodiverse into general education classrooms. Our participants also told us that watching students grow over the year brought them greater expectations for the kinds of learning that this neurodiverse students could do. It also created opportunities for peer modeling and incidental teaching that went far beyond the kind of formal instruction that was going on in the reading groups. The focus students, that is the neurodiverse students, were perceived as more competent. The neurodiverse students learned expectations for appropriate behaviors, and that their peers saw that differences are okay, not something to be afraid of or shy away from. And then it offered, because they were working together, opportunities to get to know each other and to see neurodiverse students as full members of the school community. So in terms of procedures, we learned a couple things. We learned that the ELSB objectives, materials, and lesson plans offered a balanced approach to instruction that the teachers appreciated because they didn't drill every day on building with sounds and symbols. They alternated both sharing building with stories and the building with sounds and symbols. And the teachers commented a number of times on the way that direct systematic instruction helps students learn more difficult skills like blending. They also noted that small group lessons were fun. And when the teacher and Mo, the frog that comes with the ELSB skill builder, were involved, they made the small group lessons fun for everyone. Peers were enthusiastic and looked forward to their opportunity to be a reading buddy, and it was a positive experience for peers who were strong readers, as well as for peers who were struggling. General education teachers had a number of comments. Here's what one teacher told us. Definitely that feeling of being special, because they are chosen to go and do something fun. So they all definitely enjoyed it immensely. And for the high readers, they got to show off a bit. And the low readers got to be with peers that were just like them. And the special education teacher said, when you see that light bulb go on and having that general ed child beside them, helping them turn that light bulb on, it is like, whoa, it is the coolest thing to see. One of the things that we spent quite a bit of time on is asking the teachers to tell us what the scheduling, staffing, collaboration, and context were, and what their reflections were on how they had to change the systems in their school to make this work. In all the sites, the teachers noted that scheduling was difficult at the beginning of the year, just getting the schedule down and then getting the schedule in place and being able to anticipate the schedule of students being in and out, who was participating and who wasn't. It was way easier in the schools that were already fully inclusive than it was in the schools that had not had experience with having kids with significant needs in their classrooms prior to the year that we did this work. Special education teachers had concerns about leaving their own classrooms and coming to the general education classroom to do the work, but they figured it out with the help of the principals how to cover their classrooms and make sure that learning was going on for the rest of the kids in their classes. Instructional staff absences and shortages made the project more challenging for everyone. So when there was an absence, they needed to develop and adhere to some crisis management plans that allowed them to continue to do the teaching that was necessary. We also found that the general education teachers appreciated having the responsibility of scheduling which reading buddies would go to which groups on which days. Figuring out logistics in terms of collaboration and context is facilitated when the teachers had a shared vision of inclusion. Collaboration can build on the positive relationships between general and special education teachers. General education teachers saw their role as facilitators. They all commented on the importance of making expectations and procedures clear before mainstreaming and instruction began. Teachers noted that the classroom noise level was a concern until they got into the daily routine, because there were at least 2, sometimes 3 or 4 reading groups going on at the same time. A principal noted, I would encourage people to take the leap. Just take the leap, because it is so rewarding. I know for us sometimes it would be so challenging that the time is so precious, and you want to make sure you are going to get an investment on that time, but take the leap because it was so great. So the last part of understanding whether or not doing this work is worthwhile is looking at the effects on reading skills, the effects on social skills, on peer relationships, on peer attitudes, adult attitudes, and systems change. Special educators reported that the students made significant progress, to dramatic progress in some cases, from being nonverbal to verbal, for instance. That progress in reading would facilitate placement in general education classrooms because the students made so much gain during the year that this project was going on. The principals expressed excitement about the perceived progress, and the general education teachers noticed increased confidence in reading skills for some reading buddies. The peers reported that they learned new words. Some of them indicated they helped the focused students learn to read. They were excited about that. This student said, he was learning how to read fluently and sound out the words and put them together. But also I was learning how we could help him more. A special ed teacher said, plus he went from the beginning of the year not knowing any letter sounds and inconsistently knowing his letters to reading sight words, knowing all of his letters, most of his letter sounds, and starting to read decodable words in books, which is great progress. Peers said they understood the focused students' atypical behaviors more. They learned about being friends and about being patient. And they learned that atypical behaviors decreased and social skills increased as the year went on. General education teachers noted that more socially appropriate behavior occurred among the neurodiverse students when they were in their classrooms. That focused students enjoyed coming in and learning routines, and that positive relationships and friendships built among all the students. Special education teachers thought that there were significant positive effects of peer modeling for the social skills that increased confidence and ability to focus and behave appropriately emerged for most of their students, and atypical behaviors became normalized. That is kind of as accepted as part of what goes on in the classroom without everyone having to stop and notice something that is less usual in a classroom. A special educator said, so it introduces the typical child to a world of this is not abnormal, this is normal for this child. And then they learn how to move beyond their little circle of friends and hopefully become empathic to those that have a harder time or need. And hopefully then they can become a role model for that child. A general educator said, we learned about being friends and being in friendship. Peers described affectionate bonds that they developed. That learning together created relationships that extended beyond the classroom, and the boundaries of normalcy got expanded. For instance, students noticing that when he does this nonverbal behavior, that's communication. So it's really kind of a great pathway for them to meet the children, and interact with them and kind of learn that they're doing the same thing we do, but they have a different way to learn. And this child said, I was really nervous because I'd never met friends like different specialized kids, and I was really nervous, but then I'm used to it now. They enjoyed the role of a reading buddy. They became more accepting of differences in atypical behavior. They changed perception when they understood weird behaviors as communication. And then adult attitudes towards inclusiveness. General educators commented on the bonds that they developed with the focused students. The special education teachers gained confidence in their ability to provide reading instruction in an integrated setting. The special education teachers reported that students were seen as more competent. This was principals, room parents, school psychologists, general educators, all commented on this sense of, wow, there's a lot more going on here for the neurodiverse kids. One general educator was nervous about starting mainstreaming, but she got comfortable over time. In terms of systems change in buildings, the end result of this project was that mainstreaming or inclusion was expanded at all the California school sites and at some of the Kansas sites. Focused students became more visible members of the school community, and their confidence and ability to teach reading systematically and comprehensively increased. So that's the end of the formal presentation, and I hope this was helpful to you. I encourage you to spend some time with the ELSB curriculum. I encourage you to take a look at the supplemental materials that we shared that help you know something about how to adapt books to make them more accessible for neurodiverse students. If you're interested in reading more about both the emergent literacy instruction for students with severe disabilities, there is an article in Exceptional Children that you can find, and also another one published a little bit later on social validity of the project that we did. I want to especially thank our amazing research team, Professors Pam Hunt and Kathleen Mortier at San Francisco State, and then a host of graduate students who were at that point finishing their doctoral degrees, either at Berkeley or at the University of Kansas, who have now gone on to faculty positions in a number of places across the country and even in Canada. And we are grateful for all of their amazing contributions and their skills in teaching reading. Thank you so much for listening. Please be in touch if you have more questions.
Welcome. Thank you guys so much for attending. We have several attendees here today. Hopefully you noticed the message in the chat box that we would love to hear some questions from you. So if you can put any questions that you have in the chat. Also, Dr. Kozleski has put some resources for you, and you should be able to find them in the Documents tab. And if one of you could let me know if you can see the resources in the Documents tab, we're not able to see them on our view. So I want to make sure that you're able to find them, because if not, I can share my email information with you and get them to you afterwards. So if any of you are able to put a message to me in the chat to let me know if you can see them, we would appreciate it. While we're waiting for some questions to be put into the chat, I just had a question. I was a former teacher before, and I know when things are very different from how I normally teach, it can be, a big lift asking me to do something new. And this curriculum had many different moving parts. So as you said, it was this comprehensive literacy program with different components, as well as the frog puppet that works on engagement, behavior, and then also the reading buddies. So how did you keep these teachers in schools engaged, which I know is really hard? You didn't lose them from the study. So how did you do that?
Well, the first thing that we did was to set aside time the summer before we began the project to do some intensive preparation with the teachers. There were two parts to that preparation. One was to learn the kits. So the teachers, every teacher got a kit. That kit became their kit. They were able to keep it after the research study was over. But we went through very methodically all of the components of teaching and practice teaching the lessons so that folks had some level of automaticity with how to hold the mo in one hand while you were pointing at script with another, and all of those kinds of things that people really need some time with. And there was a lot of time for questioning. And then because we prepared people in groups that were both across schools in the same region, but also we had general and special educators who sat in on some of these sessions together. There was time for people to do some prep work around, so when do you want to do this and what will this look like? So we began to have some scheduling conversations that happened before school actually started. I think that was very, very helpful to everyone. Most of these schools also had the students who came into the classrooms had been in those schools in previous years. So the teachers had some familiarity with the students and certainly familiarity with their colleagues. So those relationships were really important to the kind of the setup for the project. Well, one thing that we observed was very, very important was that once a week, a researcher would be in a class and they had a very short protocol that they used that was a check to make sure that all of the components of the reading lesson were actually being done by a person. Not everybody was seen each week, but somebody in every school was seen each week. Oh, okay. And that fidelity check was also the basis of a conversation that the teacher was able to have with the fidelity checker. Oh, I noticed that you did this, and I wonder if you rearrange where your book is, or if you make sure all your materials are right there on your left, because I notice you're actually left-handed. Those kinds of little adjustments to the rapid pace of the lessons helped people get extremely proficient quite quickly.
And so it seems like if this wasn't a research study, an instructional coach or reading coach or someone like that could help provide support for any school adopting this curriculum and using it.
That's exactly right. And I think that because that fidelity checker was such a brief instrument and it created the opportunity for conversation, it was actually very rich professional learning opportunity.
That's great. So remember, if you have a chance to put a question or a thought in the chat, we'd love to discuss it with you. A minute or two.
You know, I think I emphasized this in the conversation, in the presentation, but if one of the things that I was quite impressed with the typical kids who were part of this study was how much they picked up and how much they observed, picked up, and actually acted on in terms of their understanding of children that were very complicated in how they made meaning of the world around them and how they expressed how they were feeling. And for kids to be able to tell us about it made me scared at first. And now I understand he's really telling me something. And now I can actually tell when he's getting stressed, and I can do something like I'll move Mo closer or move the book here or give them the tool that they need to point at. Those things that happened spontaneously. We didn't train kids to do that, any of that, but it happened. And it facilitated their interaction, I thought was an amazing part of this whole study.
Yeah, you see that with siblings of students with disabilities, but to see it happening in the classroom, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And for them to be able to articulate it, I thought was really, really, really super.
And you mentioned so many just transformative experiences, not only the reading gains, but also the verbal to nonverbal. Like that's just so amazing, just having those opportunities, I think, to interact with other students, just transforming how kids perceive each other and the friendships it's building. But I think one of the most powerful thing is the systems change, because that is really hard to move. So, you know, moving schools to actually do inclusion, I mean, that's not only impacting that one classroom, but that's a pretty big shift. Do you have any ideas of like what might have happened? Like, is this something more that you as researchers help with leadership, or do you think this is teachers pushing the leadership, or like how, having an insight on how that systems change actually happened?
Well, I think it's both a policy environment at the leadership level of a school that facilitates and also emphasizes the importance of the outcomes for all learners. Nobody else can do that but the key leaders in a building. And sometimes those leaders are not only the principal and if there's an assistant principal, but it's also teacher leaders throughout the school who understand the significance of the fact that every classroom in an American school has a range of children with a variety of abilities, some of which are rise to the level of having an IEP for special education, but many disabilities remain hidden. And so teachers are actually teaching a broad range of children who come to the learning process in very different ways. And the more that teachers understand how to organize and set up their classrooms in ways that give them opportunities to work in small groups, to provide intensive and carefully designed instruction that provides feedback loops to kids to help them, to support them, that is a win for all teachers to have that experience. And so one of the things that this particular project allowed us to do in these schools was to emphasize the features of what a strong and robust approach to addressing learning differences that exist in all classrooms. And when the leaders did that and the teachers could see improvements in their kids, that made a huge difference. So the bottom up part is, this is outside of my sphere.
Yeah.
Outside of the way that I think about my teaching, but now I can see that I can teach in a different way. And it facilitates learning for kids that have been disengaged. That's very powerful motivation for teachers. Teachers want to do well by every kid.
Right. I'm going to put my email in the chat. If any of you, again, are not able to access the documents, please feel free to email me afterwards and I will get them to you. And we just have a few more minutes. I want to give people a chance if they have any questions. And I also just want to thank Dr. Kozleski for your time and sharing your work with us. I had the privilege of actually following this project for a few years and hearing every few months about the progress. And it was one of the projects that I really wish I could see be on the ground to see in the schools, because it just sounded so transformative to these kids' lives. And if you are curious about the curriculum, some people joined late. It's called Early Literacy Skill Builder. I'm going to put it in the chat. And it's produced by the Attainment Company right now. And is being used by quite a few schools across the nation. And it did start with a grant funded by the center where I work for, the National Center for Special Education Research. And then it got produced now so that schools all across the nation can use it. And Dr. Kozleski and Pam Hunt took it even further by adding this buddy reading component in inclusion classroom settings. So really excited to see this work continue to grow.
We're excited about it too. And now that I'm in California, not very far from where these schools were that we did some of this work in California, one of the researchers from the California team has joined us at Stanford. We're beginning to break ground with some new campuses in the California area to bring this kind of approach to whole school inclusive practice and to build it into our teacher preparation programs. Please feel free to contact me as well. I'll put my email in there again. And if you have any questions, I'd be delighted to correspond with you later.
Okay, well, I don't see any other questions. And so I have another presentation to get to that I'll be facilitating. But I think there'll be a way for you to access this presentation for any of you who came late. You should be able to access the main conference website, and I think be able to get that in the future to watch it again if you missed the beginning, because it was a really wonderful presentation. There's actually a video. You get to see the kids and the teachers interacting. So if you missed that part, I highly recommend that you get a chance to watch it in the future. Show it to your school leaders, other teachers, to get them involved in this kind of transformative type of teaching and learning.
Sarah, thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much for your time. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye-bye.